takes it back to his lab. The otolith bone is just like a tree ring. They've got little rings on it. He can tell how old the fish is. Then he compares it to how long the fish is, and that tells him whether our fish are growing right or not growing. So that's a big initiative that we've been involved with. Dwayne has had a cooler at Captain's Quarters. We've got one at Indian Point now. Matthew Bay had one on his dock for a while. He doesn't. You'll hear more about the coolers coming up pretty soon. If you would just raise your hand if you have participated in helping DWR stop fingerlings. Hold on, keep them up. Stop fingerlings or pull gill nets. Excellent. We're helping DWR out with that. And if you want to be part of that, let us know. Dan, you can always use help, right? Let's see.
Chad would really like for somebody to take over the stinky head business.
So those fish heads are frozen, and somebody's got to put them out. Usually it's Gary. Where are you, Gary? Gary puts them out. They thaw overnight, and then we're dealing with at that sometimes months old frozen fish heads that are dripping.
Slimy dripping.
It's not great, but it's necessary. Some of the pictures, and Dan will go into more of this stuff about the fish stocking and all of that. If you did a angler journal last year, just raise your hand. Can't tell you how much we appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. So those are probably cycled enough that everybody's seen those pictures. Did I miss anything? We had a Christmas party. The Christmas party was fantastic. It was up here at Farmhouse Catering. What else have we done? Done a lot. Anything else that we want to go over? We're not going to do any business kind of stuff tonight. No secretary report, no treasury report, no. Those are the things right there, the members that did, well, that's fine. We'll keep that going for a while, but there's a copy of John's newsletter. That's us.
Do you want to talk about SML Plus and the water temps?
That's right. Tim, where are you? Tim Ball, where are you? So Tim had an app about this time last year. He had a temperature gauge on his dock in Becky. Nathan Carroll had some additional temperature equipment. And so we merged the two. Tim was nice enough to let us integrate the thermometers into his website, his app, sorry. We also added the AEP water depth gauge. What else is on there now? The hot dog boat? Yeah, the wind gauge is on there, things like that. That's an app that's free to download. Anybody can do that. Doesn't matter if you're a Striper Club member or anybody. So there's a lot of good information on that.
And it's called what?
What's it called?
SML Plus. You can just go to any of your app stores, SML Plus, with just the plus sign, not spelled, just SML and then the plus sign. I think we're back about to where we are. Does anybody want to talk about any fishing success? We always do this at any meeting. Open it up to any sort of fishing success.
My name's John Hughes.
King of the night.
King of the night.
How about the map too?
Oh, yeah. Did everybody get to pick up? John brought a bunch of these. I don't know where they came from.
You don't want to know.
But they're just free lake maps. So if you didn't pick one up when you came in, find them over here and pick them up.
Got all John's spots for me.
Every line, every dock, every fish on the Blackwater side. There are no fish on the Roanoke side, so please do not fish above the bridge on the Roanoke side, please. Oh, one thing, since and if you would, if you don't mind, if you are a if you have a captain's license and you're here tonight, if you just raise your hand, I see 4 or 5, maybe 6 of them here. We are going to try, the Striper Club is going to try to put some lights out. So if maybe afterward, if you don't mind kind of coming over to the side and let's talk about maybe some places that we can put lights around the lake. We're going to try 1 or 2, but we want to make sure that we're putting them in the right places. So you guys have the knowledge, and if you come and talk to us and let us know what you're thinking, all right? Anybody else have anything? Any questions about what the club does, what we do, what our initiatives are, anything like that? Perfect. Quick enough. Are you first? I'll let you, Dan. We'll just let Dan do his thing.
Okay. Or maybe the two of you here don't know who I am. I'm Dan Wilson, a local biologist for the area. A year ago at this same meeting, part of my presentation, I went through an upcoming study that we would be working on, trying to figure out what the mortality rate is in the summertime when we catch the striped bass and release it. And at that time, I had been trying to get some funding to do it, and it never came through, so I thought I'll just go ahead and do what we can, get as much information as we can, to try and answer some of the questions, knowing when we get that far. So I kind of outlined what I was planning on doing, and then another month or so after the meeting, I got a call and said, well, we're giving you the funding for the study. So I did not conduct the study last summer like I told everybody I was going to. We were waiting to get that money to a university for students, grad students to take it. We did some work, so I do have a little bit of information, but we did do some work.
Just look it up.
We did do some work, some preliminary exercises to try and figure some things out for the upcoming year to make it a little easier on the student when he comes in. So with that said, our student that will be working on the project for the next 2 summers is Nathan Smith, and he's going to come up and basically give you a little presentation on what they're going to be doing and what their goals and objectives are.
Hi everybody. Like Dan said, I'm Nathan Smith. I'm from Coastal Carolina University. For those who don't know, that's in Conway, South Carolina, from Coastal Beach. So, a little background on just me and what I'm doing here. I was getting ready to graduate this December. I had everything going on for me. And halfway through the semester, I got an email from a professor that I missed by 2 days saying, hey, you want to do this grad school thing? I don't know what your plans are. I'm like, well, yeah. Someone talked to me and said, yeah, I'll pay you to go fish for stripers if you do this project. Yes. So after kind of getting that golden ticket,
It's still
here
on.
I am. My background on stripers, I'm actually from St. Mary's County, Maryland. There we go. Born and raised, to the detriment maybe, but all right. But I grew up on the Potomac and Patuxent.
We'll just turn it back on when he goes up.
And that's what
Or let them
my
swear.
background in fishing really has been. And so from that, I, really like the ocean, really like fish, all that sort of stuff. That's where I ended up at Coastal studying marine science. And then I got Jerry rigged onto the biology department to do this project. And so I'm doing this project with Dr. Derek Crane, who's my advisor, and we're partnering with Dan. And like he said, our project is working on the catch and release mortality of striped bass here in Smith Mountain. We're not worried about any other striped bass, but just Smith Mountain.
It was working.
All for wine of the battery.
Probably only has a 10-foot range, you might need to get closer.
Bad day when a man doesn't know how to row.
Swim out of frame.
Alright, so I just gotta be like right over here, is that where I want to be? Perfect. Yeah, so when we're thinking about mortality and fish mortality, we can kind of group how a fish dies into three general sections. And so that first group of mortality is natural mortality. So that's anything that causes the fish to die of natural causes. So that can be fish is just really old, fish has disease, fish ate a fish that's a little bit too big and it choked, like random stuff like that, but that's part of that function of mortality. We also have harvest. That's all the fish that we pulled out of the lake for consumption. And then we also have catch and release mortality, meaning all the fish that we caught that we don't want and we put it back in the water, but they still die anyway. And a lot of the times, that catch and release portion is really hard to quantify because it's not something like, yeah, I took 3 fish home, or this is the amount of fish we had sampled before, and then we went and sampled again, and we have less fish. So this is a much more nuanced question that we're trying to be able to answer.
You're holding your Velcro. Hey.
Well, what this slide is supposed to show you is a bunch of different factors that go into catch and release mortality. And those are either anthropogenic factors, meaning human-derived factors. And those things include fight time, hook location, so anatomically on the fish, whether it's on the lip, whether it's deep in the mouth, if it's on the gills, and their gear type, so whether you're using live bait or artificial bait, or handling time, how long that fish is against the boat, trying to pull lures out in the boat, in your hands, taking pictures, those kinds of things. We also have natural factors, where those can be temperature, those can be depth of where the fish was tangled at. So how deep the fish actually was when it did onto the hook. Things such as
Nathan, you're doing really good. we just took away his presentation, so throwing him right in the fire.
Yeah, you might have to plug the
Brings back nightmares when you're in that presentation already.
I wouldn't know.
There's a lot of different things that go into
A lot of things.
So, there's some previous work that's been done doing catch and release mortality on strikers. Oh, yeah.
Don't do anything.
There's only 3 fishes in there. So then body size is the last thing. How long the fish is, how old the fish is. These are all other biological factors that an angler can't control, but can still influence mortality.
It might work now.
Alright, so yeah, previous studies in catch and release mortality. The 2 biggest factors that came from a review study done in 2018 by Bettinger and Weil showed that temperature and gear type were the 2 biggest factors that actually influence catch and release mortality. And so factors in gear type, that's like whether you're using artificial or live baits. And the increases in mortality typically happen during the summer. And it varies where you go, what lake or river or reservoir you're at. But those could be as high as 40 to 83% mortality, because then 80% of the time that fish is going to die regardless of whether you've done anything and put it back. Or In the spring, it's like 0 to 21% in those same lakes. So it's about a 4x increase in mortality just from temperatures. And then that study also did something really influential, which was they calculated a proportion of striped bass that were lost based on temperatures and release rates. So that is how hot it is and how often are fish being put back. That can correlate to this percentage of fish that you caught are going to die anyway. And so that data was also gotten from Smith Mountain Lake, which will be pretty interesting as we get moving on.
Quick question.
Yeah.
You said natural bait versus artificial lure. Which is worse for mortality?
As far as what we know now, typically live bait is associated with worse mortality because it's along the lines of a more fitting meal for stripers, and they inhale it deeper.
Okay.
And so you usually get deeper hooks at that. But yeah. And so how research previous to this review, and so most of the research was done between the mid-80s to the mid-early 2000s. Up until 2013, most states, meaning most state agencies, about 50% of them, didn't have any idea how much catch and release mortality actually influenced their fishery. And so only 4 out of 24 states had described catch and release mortality as any level of importance to their management style. And those states were New York, Virginia, Maryland, and South Carolina. That's kind of no-brainers because those are some of the biggest striped bass fisheries. But it's interesting how places like Oklahoma, who have huge striped bass fisheries, don't even think it's important. And then catch and release mortality is thought to be more of a social issue over a biological issue. That means state agencies are kind of putting the blame more towards anglers, saying any catch and release mortality is more attributed to angler misuse and mistreatment as opposed to any biological issues that could be going on. But when we looked at that review study and we look at Smith Mountain Lake doesn't really fit the bill for the typical southern striper reservoir. And if we look at just a side-by-side comparison with Lake Murray in South Carolina, Lake Murray was the main study that showed the biggest kind of scare factor with that big 80% mortality during the summer. And so when we look at the average depth, Smith Mountain Lake is like twice as deep on average, and the surface area is about half as much. So if we look at those two factors alone, we basically get a shape of a bowl versus a pan kind of idea. And so if any of us cooks in here have put a pot of boiling water on the stove or try to like reduce a sauce in a saucepan, which one's going to boil faster? The bigger, wider pan, because it has so much more area exposed to that incoming heat. So Lake Murray has so much extra space dedicated for the sun to come in on this lake and evaporate a bunch of water off and raise the temperature. Smith Mountain Lake is kind of insulated in that it's not as wide, it's deeper, so the majority of the water gets protected from all that incoming sun. As well as, even though the surface temperatures are roughly similar, Lake Murray can have some issues dealing with oxygen, or underneath the thermic line, or a really sharp decrease in temperature, there's not even oxygen under there. So there's pretty stark differences between these two. And so what I've been trying to allude to is there's been some biological challenges to striped bass that review paper has mentioned and is trying to gain attention for. And this main biological issue is called habitat squeeze. And so kind of works in a few big processes. And one of them is temperature. So when we take our regular lakes, that kind of slow-moving water, when you have sun beating on the lake, you end up getting what's called thermal stratification. And so that's where the sun is heating up the water, and it's heating up this top layer called the epithelium. That heat moves down, but because of some funny water physics, after a certain depth, water really likes to retain heat, and so it just gets really cold as you start getting deeper. And so right here, this is our thermocline, that is really sharp decrease, and then it stays about the same temperature right down to the bottom. With stripers, this temperature can be limiting because, as most of us know, stripers don't like that warm water. And so when we have the top part of the water getting heat up, that's going to force stripers down into the water column. Another thing we have going on and is related to the carbon cycle. Most people are familiar with the food chain, where you have plants in the water, algae, and you have phytoplankton, little bugs that are eating them, and then those feed the smaller fish and then the bigger fish. When we have, in the summer, and the sun's out, algae bloom, there's a lot more algae, a lot more food for phytoplankton. Phytoplankton bloom because they're eating all this food, and then all the fish are coming up, we get more schools of shad, everything's growing up, blooming. Well, not everything gets killed, it gets eaten. There's going to be waste. Those phytoplankton and stuff, most of them die and start sinking to the bottom of the lake. When they start doing that, bacteria at the bottom of the lake decompose them, they start breaking them down. But those are animals too. So as they're eating, they're breathing, they're using up oxygen just like we do. And so as they're using up oxygen, they're just making a big suction of all this oxygen and draining it. So now the lower part of the lake at the bottom doesn't have any oxygen in it anymore. And depending on where you are and some different other factors, there's the level where there's no oxygen can get up pretty high. And so then when you have stripers where they only like certain regimes, they'll get stuck in this little narrow body of water. They can be pretty problematic. So if we're going to compare it back to Lake Murray, this is a temperature plot of Lake Murray and this big fancy colorful one. And then this is a temperature plot with Smith Mountain Lake. And so what you see is for Lake Murray, temperature is this axis here, where this white heat is really hot. That's 32.5 degrees Celsius, or about 88 to 90, 92 degrees. Where down here is the blue, this is 20 degrees Celsius, or about 78 degrees. And then this scale here, this is time. So over here, this is April. We got July right here, and September. So we got the heat of summer right in this bit right here. On this, and this is depth. So the further you're going down, it gets a little bit better. But in 2 meters, or about 6 feet of water, it's still 30 degrees. It's still pretty warm. Where on Smith Mountain Lake, this is our depth, and this is temperature. We have the first meter, so 2.5 feet, is the only space where water is higher than 25 degrees Celsius, or 70-some degrees. There's a paper that was done recently that found that stripers prefer waters that are colder than 25 degrees Celsius and more than 3 milligrams per liter of oxygen. So that's just a reference in terms of oxygen. But what we're getting at is the first 2.5 feet are the only layer of water that's really too hot for stripers in the heat of summer, which is week 6. That's this line right here at the end. That's the only real time that it's higher than that temperature that they don't like. Whereas Lake Murray, you don't have any space where there is a temperature that they actually like. And so if we move to the next slide, we'll look at oxygen. Same thing applies. This is the amount of oxygen available in the water. and this is your depth. In the heat of summer, which is a square line, the first time that stripers experience conditions that aren't like their preferences is after 10 meters in depth. That's about 30 feet. So you get to 30 feet down, and then there's issues. Whereas in Lake Murray, what we really don't like is this purplish color. That is not enough oxygen to support stripers, meaning they will literally keel over and die because there's not enough oxygen. That's this hard line right here. And if we remember our temperature, it was about 30 degrees here. So essentially what I'm getting at is based on the temperature forcing fish down and oxygen availability forcing fish up, fish in Lake Murray are only getting about 3 feet of swimming room throughout the whole lake that's actually available for them to breathe. And they're already freaking out because it's still too hot. Whereas our fish in Smith Pond Lake, even if you take away the top 2.5 feet of water, they'll have another 28 feet before they even start seeing any signs of oxygen depletion. But what the paper telling about how stripers can experience different conditions, they found that stripers that can acclimate, they can get used to different temperatures. The ones that are used to colder water that you see down here, which is about 25, 20 degrees Celsius, they can tolerate even less oxygen than that 3 number. They can tolerate less than 2. So that puts us down here to below 32 meters. That's over 100 feet of water where they have they can have free reign. They have all this free space that they can operate in compared to a lake where they have about 2.5. It's a pretty jarring difference considering in our review, we're comparing these as lakes that are similar, and then we're using that information to make inferences on how much fish we're actually losing. And so this table up here is from that review paper, and it's using these temperatures here. And then what it says is 26.3 degrees Celsius, 25.8 degrees Celsius, 27.1. And if you remember from our temperature graph, that's basically, those are your surface temperatures, meaning that they looked on their, or the temperatures that were given to them, or it came up on your fish finder. That's just at the top. We're not looking at all the rest of the water beneath. So not that this work was done in error, but these proportions might not reflect what we're actually seeing here in Smith Pond. And so, but because this paper was pretty influential and was giving management a really good tool to actually say, hey, this might be the amount of catch and release mortality that you could be seeing, states that included catch and release mortality as important to their management based their guidelines and regulations on that data. And so what you see is we have our guidelines like limiting your handling, keeping fish wet as much as you can, not fishing after you catch your creel limit. Regulations were like it's your 2 fish and that's it. And November 1st to May 31st of no striper between 30 and 40, and no size limit in June to October. That no size limit in particular is what gives you guys the ability to catch your 2 fish, limit how many fish you're actually catching, and then go home, right? But if catch and release mortality isn't as high as it is, then these might not be completely necessary. So it begs the question, do the guidelines and regulations that are here acting as Smith Mountain Lake actually relevant to Smith Mountain Lake as its own system? And so in order to answer that question, we need to know a few things. One of those is, what is the catch and release mortality, and can we make an estimate of that for Smith Mountain Lake as a system? Other things we need to know is, what temperatures are stripers actually using? Right, that relationship with temperature and depth it changes. Well, if we know what temperatures that they actually occupy, we can say, oh, well, they're at this depth, they're 50 feet down, they're 60 feet down. We know where they are. And we're also going to want to model some different conditions and rates of release. So going back to our management ideas and seeing how effective different styles can be. And also we want to evaluate impacts of catch release mortality on things like trophy potential and see how is this level of fish kill affecting our overall population, and if it's limiting how old fish can get, how big fish can get. And so this is now going to get to a segue of what I'm actually going to be doing this summer and next summer. And how I'm going to figure out some of these questions is I'm going to go catch fish. And I'm so excited to do that because that's and how I'm going to catch fish is I'm going to primarily use artificials, doing stuff like dead sticking, maybe night fishing, stuff like that. If we're getting trouble getting the numbers of fish that I need, we might go and start to do some live bait stuff. But we want to limit that just because live bait has a lot of extra variables that we don't really need to worry about at this point in time. So kind of how this timeline is going to go is I'm going to be coming back for about a week in June, and I need 10 fish. And I'm going to be coming in July to August. That's my main sampling period. I'm going to need 40 fish from there because that's the hottest time of the year. And then coming back in October, about another 10 fish. And this will be from 2024 to 2025. I'll be here doing this stuff. And so the numbers and time frame is to get about an even amount of fish at different temperatures throughout the year so we can get a good look at how temperature affects this catch and release mortality. And how I'm going to be able to find them and track them and keep track of where they're going and how deep they are, I'm going to be tagging them with acoustic transmitter. It's going to look just like this. It's going to be attached to the fish through the upper dorsal musculature, so that top section right to the meat in between the spiny dorsal and the soft dorsal, so it's kind of right in here. But it's not going to be this kind of style. It's going to look just like this thing. And so what that acoustic transmitter does is transmits a ultrasonic ping, so literally an audible sound, and it's going to tell me who it is, and it's going to tell me what temperature it has a temperature sensor. And so once we've caught this fish, I've poked holes in it, put a tag on it. I'm going to intensely follow it for about 3 to 4 days to a week and come back and check on it about a week after. And the reason why I want to be really in on following it for a while is because any direct correlation with catch and release mortality, as in they're dying from the catching event itself, has been shown to happen in about 72 hours. So I really want to make sure that I'm following this thing for that first 72 hours and then doing some kind of regular checkups as we find this fish. And how we're going to figure out whether it's actually living or not, because not all fish float. We want to kind of use position as an indicator of its condition. So what that means is I'm going to have this tag and it's moving around the lake. Well, a moving tag is a moving fish. That fish is still alive. A non-moving tag is a not moving fish. It's not alive. So kind of along the lines of if we come and find this fish and this is in the same cove for the past 3 times I found this fish, he's not alive. So he's going to be dead. But because we can say, oh, this fish is alive, but this fish is dead, now we have an estimate of how many fish are actually dying from catching it and putting it back. And so what this picture right here is, this is a hydrophone. It's literally microphones for the water. I'm going to have 2 types with me. There's going to be what's called an omnidirectional hydrophone that's going to be looking all over the place. And I'm going to be towing that behind my work boat. It's kind of like if you're trolling, but with a big ass microphone. And it's going to be hanging off the back about kind of 5 feet under, so you can kind of avoid the boat traffic noise and stuff like that. And that'll just be around, and if I run into a fish, it says, "Oh, I'm a fish over here." It doesn't tell me where it is though. So then what I'll be able to do is I'll be able to stop pull in my omnidirectional hydrophone, and put in this kind. This is a unidirectional hydrophone, and what that does is it gets louder when I'm pointing at the fish. So then I can actually kind of go in, track the fish down, figure out where he is, get close enough where I'm like, yeah, he's out here, and then put a GPS coordinate, and now I know where the fish is. Then I can go back again and again, doing this a couple different times, seeing how that distance changes, and I can be like, okay, well this fish is alive, this fish is dead, blah, 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 blah. And on this picture, this is our receiver, and so this is what's going to be picking up the pings. They're in series, so kind of like Morse code of patterns of boots. And then, but what that does, it tells me which tag it is and what temperature it's at. So then we get, okay, this tag is over here, it's been moving, and it's been moving at 23 degrees Celsius, or whatever. And so that's kind of how we're going to get the most of our data. We're going to use the temperature as a proxy for depth. The tags are really nice, but in order to keep them small and keep the weight down in those, we can't put as many sensors as we want in them. So right now we're using temperature because it gives us more of the information of what the fish is looking for as opposed to just how to keep it.
What happens if somebody catches your tagged fish?
Well, hopefully they put it back. I'd preferably like a call. If there's someone from the Striker Club, I'll have my number available. If you just tell me where it is, that's good enough. But because it also depends when that fish was caught. So if I'm in the middle of tracking that fish, say if it's in the first 2 days of finding it, then I probably still want to try and follow that fish more. We'll keep that in mind. But also, I'm only going to be catching about 60 fish total and putting tags on them. So the odds of the whole week that we get caught again are low. But we're still kind of working on some of the little excess stuff in case weird things like that happen. But for the most part, if it does, you guys will have my number, or I'll be in the group or something, and you say, hey, I found your fish. And then just tell me where it is, and I'll follow up.
Okay, you want us to throw it back in to talk. So, is there any indication on that sensor that we could then tell you is there a number on that would identify it for
Yes.
you?
Yeah,
Okay.
all the tags
Okay.
will have, it was on the slide before, but the little white labels on all those tags, they all have identifying numbers of which it is, and I'll put my cell phone number on those tags, and then so they'll be all right there. You'll be like, here's Nathan, 83 or whatever it is. I found your fish. This is where I'm at, and then have at it. So,
Will the tag tell you whether the fish was caught with an artificial bait or a
no,
live bait?
not explicitly. That's going to be stuff I'll be keeping track of which number and what or whatever. But like I said, we're going to, especially in this first year, I'm going to focus on doing artificials because we relieve a lot of the extra work. Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about catch logs and things like that. Did you think about just a tagging program also for folks that catch fish that could log in any, like, I catch 6, they're 30 feet down, whatever, I caught them on July 1st or whatever, and log these fish in with their tag numbers. If those tags come back or anybody catches them, it might help you with your data that way, because it looks like the regulations are really tied to the NMFS system, like off the New York Bight off of Jersey, off Chesapeake Bay. I mean, that's almost the exact same regs that they're running right now if they're in saltwater.
Yeah, we've done those tags like what you're talking about. And they did give us some answers. They provided a lot of information years ago when we were having all these discussions about how bad catching and release mortality was in the summer, bad at all. So we just did tags that could be, they didn't have any electronics on them. You stick the tag in, somebody catches it and that like that. So we did some of that, and we got some results back from it. But years later, we would It did give us, like I said, information, but we'd like to get more specific and get a lot better information. Because then we tag those fish, put them back, and we're relying on just a lot of tags coming back and making a lot more assumptions than we are in this. We're hoping that this one gives us a lot more specific information, not just how often do they die, but what exactly can we do when we catch a fish, if we can get them to live. What's the best thing we can do to get them to live, or certain sizes that live better than others. So, kind of what you're talking about, we've done a lot of that. It wouldn't be a bad idea to do more, a lot more resolution on that information.
Yeah, I was just thinking, for, let's say 60 fish over a year and a half, 2 years, the sample size.
We would need hundreds of them.
Question, does it give you like the migration pattern? Because the guys are always looking for where to play to show them how they travel at different times of the year. If they go upriver, you know.
Well, so these tags, they're electronic, they have batteries. They're not meant to be lasting multiple years. This isn't like your typical shark following kind of tag where it pops up and the satellite picks it up and says, I'm over here, and then you can log on the computer. These are they're ultrasonic tags, so it's sending out sound waves that you have to have a microphone to hear. Only works underwater. And so
Maybe to make it a little easier on you, we've kind of contracted them to do this, and what you're talking about is what people commonly do with these type projects. Is they tag fish and they follow them long term, see where they're going, what their habits are, and all that type of thing. And we ask them to not do that part of it, just do, because limited money, limited time, so we're really focusing in just specifically on the catching part, and we didn't have really the funding to tack on a whole bunch more fish and have somebody out there all year long following. So what he's doing is very short term. You know, like you said, if the fish live for a week or so, we know that they made it through that episode, and we're not, the tags that we're using aren't for that long term. I would love to do that also, but the reality is we don't have time or money to add that part of it.
And the biggest thing for this study is we're focusing on catching these. So what are the odds that a fish is going to die because it was caught by rod? And that's the focus. We're not moving, we're not doing anything extra stuff because that's beyond the scope of the project.
If we had more time and money, we could tack it on, but that's just the limitations we're facing.
What specific data are you going to collect with each catch? So then, therefore, when you dump it all, you can make predictions.
Are you going to be kind of same format as that? With some other things? Our kind of initial part in it this summer, it would be we take a temperature profile of the water depth. We measure what depth of water. Everybody's looking, we were using kind of dead sticky type stuff, and so when a person hooked the fish, they made a special note, okay, that fish was at 62 feet, that's where I was fishing. How long it takes to get the fish to the boat, how long it takes to get the fish processed and back in the water. Seemed like there was a couple more. How long the fish was to give us a length on it. So, trying to think of, I think that pretty much covers most of what we're recording. Trying to record as much as we could about that specific fish, so we have a data set for each fish that comes in. It's going to make a difference for us in the long run. We're trying to answer some of this. Fish from 100 feet of water, they survive less than fish caught out of 30 feet of water. There's a number of questions like that that we'd like to answer.
And like old days before anything of what bait was caught on, where the hook actually landed on the fish, and whether we saw any bleeding or other things like that. So really we're kind of trying to take a snapshot of what it is that this fish experienced through this event of fishing, and so kind of all those little things that can matter as much as we can possibly.
Right. And then the goal from that for everybody here would be, if they caught a fish in 40 foot of water and it took 5 minutes to get in and it was out for 3 minutes, and there'll be some kind of chart where we can make an educated decision on whether we should.
That is one of the goals when this is all over with, is to provide information exactly on what we found out. If you caught a fish in 80 foot of water, 80% chance it's going to die, or put in the variables that we can determine that improves it or doesn't improve it. But yeah, that's what we'd like to have eventually is a guide on all this. And kind of the first year, I think, at least what I had in mind, and I think you do too, is what we're trying to do is fish in a manner that gives us the best chance for that fish to survive. So it's kind of the trial year, trying to do everything as good as we can. That's why live bait, so far we're going to avoid that as much as we can, just better hook sets, decent rates so that we don't play them for a long time. So try and hook them quick, get them in the boat quick, process them quick, and get them in the water quick. Do everything we can possibly do to enhance the survival. And if we do everything the best case scenario, and then still most of them die, then that pretty much answers the question. Is if you do things in a bad way, they're certainly not going to get any better.
So what data or method are you using to calculate the depth based on live temperature?
So those temperature profiles that you're just looking at, we'll have a more in-depth basically graph of that. And as we're doing our fishing, we're going to be reporting the depth profile all the way down at that location, what it experiences. So we're going to make a line for each one of those fish for the experiences that they're getting. And so then when we go back and see what temperatures the fish are occupying, we have this whole collage of temperature lines throughout the year and how temperature is changing throughout the year. And pinpointing this depth, because we found this fish at this time, and we have a depth profile that says this is where that temperature is.
The depth one would be ideal. And if I remember right, the cost on those was really high. We had unlimited budget with all kinds of things, but it was going to just kill us on financing.
Yeah, but I'm sure you guys are saying there's going to be a lot of variability and it's going to be a rough estimate of where.
When you take when you're saying you're taking this one temperature variable and putting it and you're making this estimate, it sounds rough, and it's not like exactly yes, it's not this to be 33 feet or whatever. At the same time, every depth calculation, like for diving meters, that there is error. There's just as much as the temperature, but also the relationship between temperature and depth in saltwater and freshwater is a very firm relationship, and that's been studied for a really, really long time. And so the formulas and calculations that relate those two are very, very fine. So the difference that we get from a temperature to depth is fairly low, mostly depending on how big that change in temperature is. So, like we said, like we're saying with the thermocline, and then it gets gradually about the same. If the fish is at the very bottom of the lake, it's going to be hard to say what depth, but we're going to know it's going to be deeper than this depth, because that curve it still is a curve. It's still a pretty fine between them. So it sounds like guesswork, but it's a lot more accurate than most.
If you determine at the end of your study that there is a high mortality rate, will that result in what the state will restock the lake?
So we could actually probably move on to the
Okay. Yeah, it could have all of this all has ramifications for what we do in the future. So we've been operating up to this point without every single piece fine-tuned going into the decision-making, and we may find out stuff through this study that kind of directs us in a little bit different management. We won't know that until it's done, but that's one of the reasons for doing it, so that we're better educated, we can make better decisions in the future, whatever that may be.
So this is kind of going into some of the things that we talked about in our discussion here. But what that estimate is, once we figure out, okay, this is our proportion of fish that died compared to the ones that didn't, we're going to use that and all the other things that we're keeping track of when we catch the fish. So bite time, hook location, handling time, temperature, body size, that they go at, and how that affects the number of fish died. And so this is a visual representation of that table we saw earlier, where we see at this temperature and this amount of release, so 1 out of 5 fish are put back in the water after they're caught, equals this amount of fish dying due to catching this mortality. And so we want to be able to take all the variables that we possibly can and put it into one big calculation and process that to get the most accurate number of it. And then we're going to take that calculation and we're going to run it like 1,000 times. So basically, we have this is the odds of the fish dying, and then we're going to change all the numbers just a little bit and do it again and again and again. And then we can get an idea of, all right, when we make, based on the variables that we've collected and what the result of that has been, 80% of the time we're confident that this is happening, or 95% of the time we're confident that X amount of fish are dying due to catching this. And like Dan was saying, and like we're all kind of thinking about, there are management implications. And so, yeah, our goal with this is to give Dan the best tools to be able to make decisions that affect the stripers, that affect you guys. And a lot of that is what we need this study to do. And with if we can get enough data from this first year that actually goes into what that best case scenario is of mortality, then the next year we might be able to play into, well, what about some of the worst case scenarios and things like that. So then we can really dial in for that guide that says, if you do X, 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 you have some amount of minutes, right? Or if you're fishing artificials and you're doing this, you get this amount of time to put in the water, and you can do a stopwatch. And then that's how you're making sure that you're following those best practices. Or things with life bait, you're doing life bait, and that's a whole other set of protocols and recommendations for you guys. But yeah, that's really what this project is about. It's a really dialed in look at what is happening to a striper after it's been caught. And this is what we think is the best way to answer that question in terms of what matters to Smith Pond Lake and what matters to Smith Pond Lake. And so that's my talk. I'd like to thank Coastal Carolina University and the Virginia Department of Wildlife for getting me out here to you guys, and be able to put this project together. I'd like to thank Federal Aid Sport Fish Restoration for funding the project and funding for me to be able to go to school and be here. And I'd like to thank you guys, because and Dan has said this to me before, but without your guys' support of the fishery and dedication to striped bass and striped bass in Smith Pond Lake, it's your guys' questions and interest that has brought this project out. And so without you guys, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be able to be doing this awesome project. And so I'm really thanking you. And with that, is there any further questions?
Roughly, how long do you think it would be before some of the results were?
Well, it's probably gonna be along the lines of, depends, what information I can get back by end of this summer, and when your guys' next meetings are. I might be able to give some preliminary stuff, but also it's gonna be, when I be able to run through all the analyses, because, what I'm not getting into is the modeling and all that, analytical stuff is not something I've started yet. I started this January. So we're starting in the summer, so really the focus for me right now is making sure that we are recording all the things that we need to record. We have the technology and it's working the way we want it to work. And we're going to be set to catch the fish within the targets that we, so I can't really tell you when, but
Some of it could be how to manage some of the results. Just for instance, if they take 40 fish this summer and by October they found out that 39 of them lived, they probably had some good report. 39 of them died, then they probably also had something to report. And then there's a whole lot of gray area in there that, you scratch in your head, you really can't come out and say one way or the other. So I think a lot of it is kind of how all this stuff starts gaining mastery.
Once we start seeing patterns in fish, then I'll be a few weeks in after we caught fish, then we might have some idea. But we also don't. I don't want to say things without having all the information, because I want to give not only Dan but you guys the best information we can. Yeah.
Just a question on the source microphone. What kind of range does that have? Because I'm just thinking fish that swim a mile and a half, 2 miles an hour, you catch it today, if it swims for 20 hours, it can be 20 to 30 miles away. This lake, they tend to move.
Right.
How are you going to find them again? What's the range on your microphone?
It's not the microphone that has range, it's the tags themselves. They're broadcasting about a kilometer away, so it's about 2/3 of a mile. So it's pretty good, but water sucks when it comes to kind of the transient stuff through it.
And so does this lake with the topography.
Thank you.
Down in the channel, we have a lot harder time finding
Yeah.
them than when they're in 30 feet of open water.
So Dan hooked me up with a pretty sweet boat, but it's going to be a lot of driving. That's really something we have.
All right. Thank you, Nathan, very much. Really appreciate that. Great job.
Hey, real quick before Dan starts, kind of give John a second to kind of readjust things, whatever. I want to give Dwayne a real quick chance to stand up and talk about captain's quarters and what his plans are, if you don't mind. But you do have to stand up.
My name is Dwayne Lamb. I run Captain's Quarters Marina down here at the bridge. This is my son Riley. You may recognize him more than you do me. It's his camera time, but just been a lot of talk about me leaving Captain's Quarters, and some people know, some people don't. But this is my last month at Captain's Quarters. We'll be moving the operation down to Indian Point Marina. We're going to continue doing boat rentals. We're going to expand on the fishing tackle. We're going to be in control of the whole marina with boat slips, boat ramps. We're going to try to make it a fishing marina, if you will. A lot of fishermen. We're going to have plan on having a flaying table station. We're going to have out shad lights on the end of the docks. Going to be able to expand the tackle right much. I'm going to be double my space, my floor space there with the bigger building, bigger parking lot there at Indian Point as well for people bringing in trucks and trailers. Give me a little bit of time to open up that boat ramp, but the boat ramp there in between the boat slips, it's going to be open at some point. My bass guys is going to follow me. My Tuesday night and my Friday night guys, the tournament's going to be run out at Indian Point there, same time frame. Starting late April. And for the ones that don't know, Indian Point is second light up there at CVS, turn right on Moorwood Road, 2.1 miles down to the end of the road there at the motel's on the right, the marina's on the left. I'll have all that land on the left of Moorwood Road there. It's a dead end.
Got a channel marker?
Channel marker R37. If you go up the Roanoke side, up from the bridge, I'm only 4 or 5 miles away by boat from my current location. And when you see R37 green marker on your left, turn back into Indian Creek. Indian Creek, and you'll see the motel, and then I'm on the backside of the motel in that cove there. And if you know anything about Indian Creek, it holds a lot of bait fish year-round, bass, striper, crappie, all those species utilize Indian Creek. So I think it's going to be a good move with the amount of square footage that I'm getting. In control of my future a little bit more. I have more control of what's going on there, and just looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a good fishing move for us, and I appreciate everyone's support over the last 25 years. It's been a good run at Captain's Quarters, but we're going to expand a little bit at Indian Point, and I'd appreciate it if everybody would just follow the support to the Indian Point Marina.
You gonna be in the old restaurant?
The old restaurant, yes. I'm going to turn the restaurant into the tackle shop. My wife is dying to cook, so I think we're going to do a food truck. But that's to come. But she wants to cook, so we're going to take and maybe have a food truck out in the parking lot. Simple stuff, fisherman stuff, hamburgers, hot dogs, chicken nuggets for the kids, maybe pizza, that sort of thing. But we're going to expand on that, but that may be May or June time frame, but hoping to be ready sometime mid-April. If we don't run into any major hiccups, I would definitely want to be there when the Tuesday night tournaments start. And then I'm missing all kinds of tournaments now, and it's just unfortunate. I should have been working on this in January instead of now, but we'll get it turned around. Just be patient with me, and look for us mid to late April, and we'll be in full swing.
Awesome.
And you're gonna take your fish head freezer with you? The fish head freezer?
There's already one there.
I don't think so. I think that we had talked about John. I don't know.
We're going to try to take it to Magnum Point Marina.
Indian Point's got one. It's there at the old tackle shop downstairs, just up from the gas station, the gas pumps there. But just get with me if you can't find it. It's a little bit smaller freezer than what I have at Captain's Quarters, but we'll show you where it's at. We'll help. Fuel, yes, we're going to continue the same operation. We're going to have tackle. We're going to have the boat rentals, the fuel. The fuel's 24/7 there at Indian Point. That's another expansion where I just have limited access there at Captain's Quarters. Indian Point is 24/7. And I'll make note of the gas prices. I'm still going to be a part of that gas
pal.
Yeah, I want to participate in that, so I'll let you know my status there. We are going to carry the 87, the 89, and the 93. We'll have all three.
Awesome.
Will that be year-round?
First year, I have not been year-round at Captain's Quarters. Fishing here has changed. Back when I started 25 years ago, there wasn't a whole lot of winter fishing here. A lot of guys converted to hunting season, and now we've got all these bass tournaments, and as the Striper Mafia tournament goes on during the winter months, so I'm leaning toward yes. I don't want to say 100%, but with everything I've got going on there, I've got 26 covered slips that I'm going to be in charge of, 19 in-water slips. Probably going to extend my season just because there's a lot more responsibility on me, but I'll keep everybody posted on that as well.
We got to look at the water out of there.
What about Captain's Quarters?
Todd, you still working on
I'm sorry?
it? Todd, you still working on it? Shed there?
Todd?
Yeah.
I assume there's no reason I'm going to change.
Right here.
I guess if Todd wants to continue running out there, he's welcome to. But that's my plan, is to turn it into not to downgrade pleasure boats and all that, but I want fishermen there. I want the guides to run their trips out of there. That just creates foot traffic and expands everybody's knowledge and fishing reports and all. So, yeah, I welcome all the guides to.
Thank you, Dwayne.
Thank you.
So before I turn it over to Dan, I do want to ask everybody one thing. So we are the Striper Club, all right? So if we can keep our questions to Dan tonight, related to striped bass at Smith Mountain Lake, please. That will help Dan, it'll help Dan stay on task. Don't move things along, it's already 8:30. So we'll turn it over to Dan. Please keep your questions. Let's keep everything about Smith Mountain and striped bass tonight. Thank you.
I'm not doing a 2-hour presentation this time. I cut it way back trying to give you just basic updates from the past and kind of the routine stuff for those of you that put yourself through this format every year. You're going to see a lot of the same stuff over and over again, but it just kind of highlights where we're at right now and left a lot of the time this year, and it'll probably be that way in the future for Nathan to do some of his work. Start off with angler diary stuff. This is basically a picture of what the striped bass population looked like last year. What this is these are the size groups on the bottom, and this is that big a deal, but essentially for each size group, the taller it is, the more fish were caught. So what this means is last year, the majority of the fish were about 22 to 27 inches. That's where the bulk of them were. The red part means the angler diary. That's what portion of what was caught was actually harvested. So that's the picture of the current fishery or population. Catch rates from the angler diaries. This is what we are seeing right now. Basically, over time, the lower this line gets, the better the fishing was. So the scale on the left is basically the catch rates, or how long it took to catch a striped bass. So it took less in 2023 than we've seen in over 10 years. So currently, right now, the fishing's been pretty good, at least for the people who are filling out diaries, most of them. Stocking. Last year, we stocked one of our lower rates, and we stocked all the fish by boat for the first time. It was something that we've been working on with the club to try and get this done. Couldn't quite do it in the past. There's always something going on, or we just didn't have enough manpower or enough time to get it all done. Probably helped last year that we had a few less boat trips to make, but for the first time, all the fish were stocked in open water and nothing on that. This is long-term stocking. So each year, and that's basically each bar tells you how many we stocked that year. And that red line is basically the average that's been put in for the last 20-some years. And this is what I've requested for this next year. Requested $300,000 for this year upcoming. And I forgot to mention too, if you have a question, just go ahead and raise your hand or stop me. Okay. This is just kind of a quirky thing. When we're doing our gill net sampling, we're really targeting 1.5-year-old fish. Younger fish, really old fish don't get caught in our nets that well. And we're really, for the older fish, we're not trying to catch those. We're really trying to target 1.5-year-old fish. As much as we've tried with different nets over the years, catching fish that we just stocked 6 months previously has never really worked out very well to give us a good picture of what's going on, except this is kind of an unusual thing. The numbers get really crazy on the number of fish that are 6 months old that we catch. Like I said, it usually doesn't mean much unless we catch this number right here. Anytime that we catch at least a little over 2 fish per net, then that means at least in the past, it's always meant that stocking that previous year actually was pretty good. And it's surprising that it's up so high because we stocked a lot less fish last year, but apparently they did really well, so I'm not expecting last year's low number to be above. Being really high, I don't think that's necessarily the case, because again, these don't always reflect how good that's going to turn out. But we'll know this coming fall how well those fish do. I already talked about that. Perhaps it's a lot more even as far as the stocking rate, but the reality is those fish don't always survive and do as well every year. So this is what the population coming into the fishery every year looks more like. This is a graph of 1.5-year-old fish over all these years, and you can tell there's a whole lot more variability. That other one, all those bars are up pretty tight, and this one goes all over the place. And a lot of that has to do with all kinds of biological things that are going on out in the system, the timing of the fish stock. Sometimes it's how healthy the fish were when they came out of the hatchery. Not everything's the same in the hatchery, but regardless, and we see this, it doesn't matter whether it's crappie or bass or whatever species, they don't recruit or reproduce the same every year. There's a lot of variability. It's Mother Nature. This is the same graph that I stuck in. Those blue dots are actually what we stocked that correlates. So 2023, obviously we didn't stock 300-some thousand. That was what we stocked that correlates with that year. Just to give you a little of that perspective, like way back here in the early 2000s, we had really high stocking rates, but we weren't getting as many fish out. So just how many fish are put in the water each year doesn't necessarily tell you how many you're going to get out of all of them. Same graph we just looked at, stocking rate. Go ahead and read it again. There's something that kind of popped up that every single time we went above this 350,000 mark, we started getting into troubles with striped bass growth. We've had striped bass growth declines in a major way 3 times now. And one of it was back in these years, and then one of them here, and again we're experiencing again right now. So I just kind of happened to notice that the other day, that each one of our times we're battling with striped bass growth and help getting a little bit forward than after we put a bunch of fish in. The years that we kept under that line, things have seemed to go pretty well. This is basic growth of striped bass for last year. Each one of those dots is an individual fish. Most of this data came from people in the club. When people submit a fish head that he was talking about, Ted was talking about, that's the information we use. Todd gave us a whole bunch of fish with his fishing. But over time, you plot all those out, these little gray lines, those are what we collected gill netting. But this is kind of the way all those fish heads look all plotted out. And you notice there's a 16-year-old fish that's 28 inches, and here's one that's about 13, 14 years old, and it's almost 40 inches. So fish don't grow the same. There's short people and tall people, and fish are the same way. Overall growth. This 2015 blue line is there to show you kind of where the rock bottom is as far as what we've seen on Smith Mountain Lake. That's not where we want to be. That's the worst growth that we've ever seen on the lake. And this red dashed line is really a compilation of all our best growth years that we've had. So what we'd like to see our fish do is something up close to this red line. It's been down here on this low one. The 2022 and 23, it's only been 1 year, and there's not going to be a whole lot of difference in that 1 year. So those are pretty much near each other. 23 was just a little bit better, but just putting this up to say I'd much rather be a lot closer to this red line. It's still not quite there. And the difference in poor growth here, you take a 10-year-old fish, and on average, if your growth isn't very good, it'll be 30 inches, where if you got good growth, it'll be 36 inches. So there's a big difference in a fish, what ultimate size they would achieve based on how well they grow. Just singling out one age group, 3.5-year-old, and it's a half because this is out of our gill net data. So all the fish in our gill nets would be a half year and we singled out 3.5, and this is kind of what this growth has looked like over time. Real good in the late 90s, dropped really low, and then came back and it's dropped down. So it's been a seesaw thing going on. The one good part is in 2023, our 2-year-olds and our 3-year-olds actually had improved growth. Not exactly where we want them, but at least things are going up. This line was continually going down, and now it's finally turned and went up a little bit. This green line is where we really want to see it at that green line or above. So the bad news is it isn't where we want it yet, but the good news is it's not getting worse. At least it's starting to turn the corner and get a little bit better for right now, at least for this year. That was a quick summary of the gillnet data, and this is a little foray there for the diaries, because this is the data we get from our gillnets. That's the fish we got, basically. So here's our 6-month-old fish, here's our 1.5-year-old fish, and here's 2- and 3-year-old fish there. That's not a lot. But you add that angler diary on it, and it rounds out the population, gives us a good picture of what the population looks like. And we use this in all kinds of ways, but you guys provide us with the information to tell you what's out there. And for people in the club, which is we go to that catch hundreds and hundreds of fish every year, and usually they can verify that what they're seeing, what the whole thing gets plotted out, that's kind of what they've been catching also.
Is the number of fishermen reports, you have that graph out, that's steadily going up, the number of fish reports?
The number of diaries?
Yeah.
The number of diaries went up last year and then went back down this year some.
So does that kind of follow, is there any information based upon that?
I haven't tried to figure out if,
you know, when you don't have a lot of guys reporting,
it could be. For example, I mean, if you brought that up, if I had 3 people and they were trophy fishermen, then it would skew those sizes much differently than if I had 3 people that just didn't care what they caught and they caught last month. So we do get all kinds of things. We get people that really concentrate more on big fish, some that don't care. But I think we're getting enough right now that I think it's portraying a fairly accurate picture of what's out there. If you get too low, not enough people to even run into that, you know, it's really reliable. So do I have the right people? Okay. This is all I need. And there was some paper over here that Chad asked me to bring them, and brought you this piece of the paper here. So you just put this, looks like that, and put the information on there, stick it in the fish's mouth, and drop it in the freezer. If you've got to put paper in the fish's mouth, which I like best because it just doesn't separate at that point, it's always stuck to the fish. But if you just use regular paper from home, it'll kind of turn into mush. A couple people tried that, and we try and take the paper out, and all we got is kind of a blob of goo that we can't really read. This paper is specially treated so it doesn't do that. If you don't get one of these pieces of paper that we provided, then you have to put it in a Ziploc bag or something to protect it. But if you put it in the fish's mouth, that usually keeps it with the fish really well. This is just a question people keep asking me about the white perch, a lot of people in the club have asked about. So this is just a little glimpse. If you think there isn't as many white perch out there, you would be correct. They've really crashed in numbers, and one of the reasons we've seen, we just don't see much reproduction now. In the early years, when this was going on, we were seeing a lot of small ones, a lot of reproduction, and fast forward to now, these are mostly older, bigger fish. We're not seeing a lot of reproduction going on. I don't know why that is, but for those that might be wondering about the white perch, the numbers really have.
Is that from gillnet data?
No, that's from electric fishing. I keep track of the gillnets too, but we get hundreds and hundreds of them electric fishing, so it's better, a lot more consistent data. I figured since we did do some work this summer, I figured I'd just share some little oddball, interesting things that we found out, just maybe to help you get more interested in the study. But like I said before, instead of trying to dive right into it and do a bunch of work, we were really trying to kind of hone in on some of the practices, experiment with some of the things that we thought were important, and kind of get our feet wet. So we start off with, we did get 14 fish tagged. The ranges, and this is probably a lot of what we're seeing here. What I'm showing is probably what will be going on a lot this summer. 42 to 32 inches worth of tagged fish. We caught them from between 50 and 102 feet of water. And it took us between a minute and a half and 4.5 minutes to actually, from the time to hook the fish, get it reeled up, get it in the boat, get a tag on it, and get it back in the water. The moral of the story is some died and some lived. But I don't have enough fish to actually tell you that we got great survival, we have bad survival, and we don't have enough data to really give you any indication of how this is all going to end up. But we had fish doing both. One of the odd things that I wasn't expecting, which kind of really screwed up our tracking process, I thought, and most of these fish are going to die probably within hours, and even beyond that, most of them are probably going to die in the first 24 hours of being released. So I thought, going into this, that we could tag a fish, let it go, in 2 days make an easy call whether that fish is still swimming or it's laying on the bottom. Oddly enough, everything we tagged immediately took off. Nothing stayed where it tagged. It all took off to like half a mile from the site where it was caught. And then it stopped. And it powdered. And it sulked. And we watch it, and it not go anywhere. And watch it not go anywhere. And said, maybe it's dead. Come back the next day. The first couple we did, we came back the next day, and I said, well, crap, they're all dying. This is going to be a pretty easy study. Everything we tagged got. Came back that day number 3, and they're gone. They all went almost for at least 2 days and just took off, stopped, and just sat there and out for a couple days. And you don't know why that is. That's totally unexpected. But I thought I could probably know within a day whether these fish are still swimming or not, but they kind of tricked us, so it requires actually a lot more work than I anticipated, because we have to keep going back every day for several days just to find out if they're going to move. This is a kind of a water profile that Nathan was alluding to. So when we caught a fish, we did a temperature profile at each spot where we caught a fish. But this was the earliest state we tagged, and this is the latest state we tagged, so I pulled out those two specific spots. But that green line is kind of the area that striped bass like, prefer as far as the temperature range. So he was talking about what fish striped bass like for oxygen and temperature and all that kind of stuff. And this green line is kind of that area where they want to be. They want to be from here and over as far as the temperature option. Oddly, we caught fish in this blue area. We caught fish from over 100 foot of water, which this is the depth here, and up to fairly warm temperatures. But when we put them back, they all went to the same little hole. Like I said, they all pouted, and if we caught a fish in 80 feet of water, it didn't go back to 80 feet of water. They all went to like 35 feet of water. Everything went back to the same kind of general depth and just sat there.
More oxygen there?
Yeah, there was oxygen. That depth was all about like somewhere in the neighborhood of 35, 40 feet is where all those fish were staying. Everything that we hooked and released for the first couple of days stayed in that kind of range. Even if we caught them out of 80 foot water, I just thought, I kind of expected if they didn't like it and they got kind of sad and mopey, they'd just go down deeper where it's cooler and rest where it's darker, and none of them did that. They all just kind of stayed shallow. Just kind of unique, odd response.
So they were resting midway in the water column?
Yeah. So, tried to keep mine pretty short so we didn't keep you here all night. Anybody got questions? Yes.
Part of the process of getting the feedback on the angler journal, I knew that this was my second year plus a few trips prior to that. But my catch rate was cut in half, caught about 4 dozen fish. But as I recall, I only caught 1 fish under 20 inches in 23. Whereas I was catching a lot of them under 20 inches in 22, fishing the same way. Pulling red cord about 20 feet, in different parts of the lake. And it just struck me that there was a noticeable improvement in the average catch size.
There was, several years ago, we stocked a pile of fish, a lot of fish, 250,000 fish. And they actually survived really good that year on top of the bunch that we put in. And so there was a lot of small fish for a while, and then now they moved up. So each year they're packing on 2 to 3 inches. And so, yeah, you're seeing a stocking of a really high number and really good survival. So the high numbers of those, and then behind that we backed it down some.
Now, I can't find one below 20 inches. Not that I'm trying to.
Are you going to try to do all the stocking from the boat this year too, since it looks like we have pretty good results last year?
That will be attempted.
More fish.
It's hard to get it all done, and it's just how everything fits together. So we have another issue this year with the hatchery. Our hatchery manager has retired, and let's see, we lost 2 people in the hatchery this year. So they have 1 full-time person right there now, and so there's a bunch of us from all over coming in trying to fill the pieces. So we may be so busy this spring that we don't have a chance to do that. But the goal is to try and do it. My expectations are it's probably not going to happen to get them all done that way, but we'll do our best.
Well, we're here to help.
It's basically getting the boats and equipment out there, having that, and you folks are just generally not equipped with the right tanks to haul that many fish, unfortunately.
Do we have to worry about wintertime fish mortality like we do in the summer?
The short answer is no. Well, then it's not even a short answer. If you're comparing summer to winter, no. Mortality in the winter is very light, less than 10%. If you handle your fish well, I mean, there's certain things that are going to happen in the winter. You know, you gill hooked, or you did a lot of damage in the fish, or you just happen to get it in and it's just one of those days and you dropped them in the bottom of the boat 8 times and, you know, everything went wrong. But, you know, if things went right and you reeled it in and got them back in the water the way you should, there's almost no mortality on that fish. It's really good. And that's been studied over and over again, and we're really confident that that winter mortality is a big issue. And we kind of know that from our past studies. We've done a number of tagging studies, and people in this room and this group have been the primary taggers. So I've gotten together with folks and given them tags, and the anglers put the tags in the fish for us, and then they get reported back to us by the angler. And we did all the tagging in those cold winter months, and have had really good success in getting all those, getting those fish back. And the bigger fish, we've been almost 100% of the fish. It's like 90-some% of fish over 30 inches were in the last tagging we did, were caught again within a year. So for those kind of numbers, we know we're getting really good survival on them, and that's guys reeling them in and actually injecting and tagging them. So between what we've done here in the past and all the other studies, very comfortable with releasing fish right now and having really a little more help.
Again, last year when you dropped the stocking numbers, you said that it was because you had a declining forward phase. This year with the projection being higher, does that mean that you're seeing a rebound in the forward phase?
No. I don't know if everybody caught that, but he asked basically, I was saying that the forage wasn't very good, and I'm trying to, just to be honest with you, avoid the forage issue and just focus on how well the fish are growing. And just saying they're not growing well, and the reason the fish don't grow as well is they're not getting what they need to eat. To make it real simple, to make it simplistic. It's not gotten a lot better than what it was as far as what we've seen on forage. However, we did see just a slight improvement in growth. And what I don't want to do is have real low stocking, in multiple years, and then potentially you have this big hole in the fishery coming through. I'd like to temper it more. If we have to go down a little bit lower next year, we'll just see what the data shows and what the growth rates show. You know, if it looks like things are better next year, we don't have to cut the rates. If things look worse, we'll cut a little bit more. It just depends on how everything looks next year. But I didn't. If it was just me and my little pond, I wouldn't have put hardly any fish up here from. But there's so many of you that rely on a consistent fishery that I didn't want to make a huge hole in the recruitment and in the population for years to come. Anybody else? Well, you guys were low on questions. One more point. For those of you that raised your hand that said you got an angler diary, or that you turned one in, if you were one of the folks who turned in just an electronic version, that there was no identifiable name or way to figure out who that person was, which is fine. And you know, I guess even a lot of those I sent stuff back. Who are those guys again that turned in some kind of diary? Did you get my response back?
Oh, yeah.
I'm just curious.
Yep.
Do you like these? Are they beneficial?
Yes.
Okay. I do this as kind of courtesy to let, you know, trying to figure out ways to make it more interesting for you guys to participate. So this is something everything that I talked about up here and all the data, basically a summary of all the data that we put together from the year. I put into these things for you guys, and they go to everybody who fills out a diary. So if you want a nice report on the fishery and everything we're looking at, send me a diary and I'll send you one of these back.
Did you also?
Yes, we give you money, either $20 or $50.
Did you also this year electronically sent how I was fishing the last 10 years?
Yes, for repeat offenders on the program, I tried doing that, and
I was shocked.
Okay, did you like?
Well, no, because I didn't catch that many fish.
Oh. Well, did you find it interesting?
Yes, I found it very interesting.
Okay, and what he's referring to, for folks that had been providing me a diary for a number of years, I thought, well, it'd be kind of nice if I could send them back a little report of how they did this year versus that next year, and you know, what size they caught, how many they caught, how many hours it took them to catch that, and all that kind of stuff. So I started doing that, and I asked a couple people, and they said they liked it. So anything I can do to try and keep you guys participating, I try and do, because it's such an important aspect of our management. So if you keep fishing for several years, I'll send that.
I enjoyed it. I really did.
Okay, good. Thanks for the feedback.
I use the paper copy because I keep the copies myself, with some notes, if you will. If we had the capability to track that on the electronic version, I would use that. But what we've heard, Chad, is that there's no way for us to retain the data if we submit electronic.
Well, I send it to them on a spreadsheet that I created myself on